Tonight's invocation is being offered by Bishop Jerry Maynard Sr., Jurisdictional Prelate of Tennessee Fourth, and Senior Pastor of the Cathedral of Praise Church. He is the guest of Councilmember Ronnie Stein.
Let us pray. God of our fathers, unto you we give thanks. We thank you for allowing mankind to govern your world and for the empowerment from you received. Tonight for the Metro County Council, these members are meeting to represent your creation and creatures. Allow them to reach decisions that will help the constituents for whom they are responsible to achieve, progress, and enjoy life at levels beyond their expectation. With our faith, we believe. With your love and mercy, we receive. And through your power, we achieve. From the works of this council, let Nashville, with its diversity in religion, ethnicity, economics, education, and many personal choices, become one. One today and one for the many tomorrows. Bless the mayor, the vice mayor, and this distinguished council. It is in your name that we pray and give thanks. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Without objection, we'll suspend the calling of the roll and ask the clerk to record the names of the members present throughout the meeting. Is there a motion for the adoption of the minutes of our April 19th meeting? Without any objection, the minutes will stand approved as written. Madam Clerk, are there any messages from the mayor?
No, ma'am, there are not.
Thank you. On your desk, there is an announcement of the vacancy for the public trustee. Nominations are due by May the 10th, and we will hold that election on May 17th. Councilman Holloman.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I just want to take one moment to introduce to the council and to the city Troop 92, which is part of the Middle Tennessee Council, and they are here with several adult leaders, and their scoutmaster is Cabot Cameron, and they meet at Woodmont Christian Church, and several of them are residents of District 24. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge them and welcome them to our meeting tonight. And I should add that they are here tonight not just because they enjoy government, but because they are working on their citizenship and the community merit badge as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're at the point of a proposed rule amendment to Rule 12. Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Committee report.
Councilman Birch.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Rules had no recommendation, 0 for, 0 against, 6 no votes.
Thank you. 6 abstentions.
6 abstentions.
Councilman Crafton.
With that rousing support, best I've ever done in that committee, no votes. But I would like to move for approval with a brief explanation.
I have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I brought this forward because really having a public hearing every other month is arbitrary. In fact, it used to be every council meeting they had a public hearing. And then it was changed to every other month. The reason I brought this forward is a couple of recent instances, for one, and number two, numerous people in the business community say that it's with having it every other month and trying to meet all the deadlines that we have with planning and filing the zoning bills. A lot of times it takes more time than they have allotted when they have property under contract and they want to develop it. And it's become a real hindrance if you have a hiccup. For example, let's say you're working on a bill and something comes up a couple of days before the public hearing and you need stuff drawn up, the planning commission or staff wants to add a few requirements, or the councilman wants to add a few requirements, to get a civil engineering firm to do it, it takes a lot of time, and you may miss that public hearing. Well, it's not a big deal unless your option or your contract runs out, you know, a couple of weeks later. Now, if you have 20 bills and you do them every other month, or you do 10 bills one month and 10 bills the next month, you're not really doing more work. We've talked with Ms. Swing, and it's going to increase our advertising costs in the $7,000 to $8,000 range. I think in a $1.6 billion budget, that's minuscule, and I'll give you an example why. Just a few months ago, because the public hearing, a couple of changes were requested, 250 job business relocation here to a commercial space didn't work out because the clock ran out on it. Now, nobody really wanted that to happen, and had we had the public hearings every month, it would have been no big deal. But now, as it stands, if you miss one hurdle, and it's you know, a lot of times it's for a very good reason, that, you know, something's caught and it's added and it needs to be in there. But, you know, if we can get this turnaround cycle down by even a month, it would be really beneficial. I think it's a way that really, in the scheme of things, doesn't cost us anything, but helps business navigate through the governmental bureaucracy, which, since I first came on the council in '95, it takes a lot longer to get a zoning bill through. It just really does. You know, so I think we can help. I don't think it's going to overburden us, because, like I said, we're not increasing the amount of work. We're simply doing it every month, so we kind of keep a cleaner slate instead of letting stuff pile up. So I really wish you'd give this consideration. It's the perfect time to do it. Tonight's a perfect example. We had a bomb scare. A lot of us couldn't make it. Some people still may not be able to make it to a public hearing tonight. Well, if we had another one next month, hey, you know, probably it's no big deal. Not a bomb scare here, thank you, down the street. But so please consider this. We had a few months left in this term, but it will set the next council up to hit the deck plates running. It'll help business get through more efficiently and cost effectively. And I would just ask for your support on this. If it doesn't work, or it needs to be tweaked, you know, we can do this either at the, you know, as we have time, or at the beginning of the next council. But I really would ask for your support on this. Thank you.
Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. Bernhardt, I was in the committee meeting, and it seemed like most of the members there just had a lot of questions about this bill. It certainly seemed like something that's good. So we'd like for you to weigh in and tell us the pros and cons, and particularly comment on if, in fact, you'll work your staff more. Are there any costs associated with that?
I think, as Councilman Crafton stated, it's relatively common to have public hearings either every meeting or every month. I mean, I've worked in situations like this. It's not unusual. From our perspective, it really won't, I don't think it'll make any real difference other than, you know, just being geared up for public hearings here. Typically, the issue is probably one more for the council and your own schedule as opposed to us, because we're working on a 2 meeting per month schedule anyway, so we can have the information up here on that schedule as well.
Thank you. Fellow council members, I'm going to support this. I had a chance to hear Councilman Crafton describe it. I hadn't read much about it, but it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed like something can work. I can understand we're being a little skeptical because we hadn't had a lot of time to pour out over it, but it seemed like something that that we can easily do, and it will serve the taxpayers as well as those who want to do business with Nashville a little bit easy and a little bit smarter. So I support it, and I hope you will as well. Thank you.
Councilman Holloman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I was one of the bold committee members to abstain from Councilman Crafton's resolution, and I guess the only issue that I wanted to raise is just simply that this is a rule change that comes at the very end of the term, and I think that's my only hesitation. I think that this is an idea worth considering. In the municipality where I work during the day, we are one of those places that there is a public hearing every meeting. It has been functional, but my preference in this particular instance would be that when we consider all of our rules at the beginning of the next term, that we take a look at the feasibility of this and decide it as we decide all of our rules in that term, and that if we need to have an additional public hearing because there is work in the pipe before the end of the term, that we could elect to have a special public hearing at our first August meeting, and that would be my preference. And so for that reason alone, I'm going to vote no tonight, but hope that we'll look at this in the fall, and if we need to, have a public hearing in August. Thank you.
Councilman Crafton.
Thank you. Normally I don't speak twice, but just to rebut my good friend's remarks, you know, at the beginning of the next council term, we will adopt this council's rules. So I'd rather play it safe and put the rule in there and let it be in there, because a new council, hey, a lot of us are not going to be here. As sad as that is to some people and as happy as it is for others. So we need to set up the next council and the next, you know, business folks to succeed. We've heard from Director Bernhardt that it doesn't affect them one bit. So I just don't see any reason why we can't support this and do something that's pro-business that doesn't cost anything except this vote here. So please support it.
We will need a machine vote. Madam Clerk.
Ayes 16, noes 17, 3 abstentions.
Motion fails. The first one is BL 2011-858, amends the Metro Code to modify the requirements applicable to home occupations. Councilmember Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Before moving to open the public hearing, I do need to, with apologies, clarify the hearing subject. The Planning Commission approved the bill, but with various recommendations on Thursday. None of those recommendations have been yet incorporated into what will be the final substitute. We are also continuing to incorporate input from, I think we're up to our 7th meeting, community meeting now. So the comments tonight, for those who've taken the time to show up, I think we obviously need to respect their time and get their input. But the bill that's before you, I can't in good conscience ask to move, so it'll be deferred. But given the fact that people have shown up, if we can ask them to have the right to speak and at least get some general sense of their preferences. And so with that, I move to open the public hearing.
Just a point of clarification, Councilmember Jameson. Will a second public hearing be necessitated with the revisions you're proposing?
Whatever happens, there will be a second public hearing. If it's not necessitated by virtue of the fact that the changes aren't considered significant, my intent was to ask this body to schedule that additional public hearing simply so we can do a couple of things. One, have the finalized substitute in people's hands to know actually what they're commenting on, because it will differ from what's on the books tonight, I think, appreciably. Two, we're scheduling a public hearing, a community hearing, and if I can take this opportunity to announce that that is scheduled May 24th at 6 p.m. at the Howard School Building, and it's being facilitated by the Neighborhood Resource Center, and I'll publicize that as well. So regardless of whether the Planning Commission determines that it's a significant revision, even if they determine that an additional public hearing would not be required, or Mr. Cooper, my intent is to request this council schedule that additional public hearing.
Thank you. Could I see a show of hands of those in support? Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Would anyone in support wish to speak? Please come to the lectern and state your name and address.
Greetings. My name is Keith Newcomb. I live at 604 Georgetown Drive in Nashville, Tennessee, since 1993. Since 2002, I've been one of the 152 persons in Nashville who holds a home occupancy permit, and have worked at home since that time without incident with any of my neighbors. I dare say most of them probably don't even know that I do work at home. I am in support of Councilman Jamison's bill, and I can tell you that he has bent over backwards to go around to community groups, take their input, and listen to the concerns of neighbors. And I, as a traditional neighborhood advocate, can say that I've become very comfortable with it. I would request one technical correction, that the number of permits at each address not be limited, subject to the restrictions in aggregate of one permit, such that married couples who work at home in separate occupations can continue to work at home together. The reasons that I ask you to consider and support this bill are that there are currently over 12,000 persons working at home in Nashville without incident, unremarkably and unnoticeably. And those businesses should stay that way, and I think that the restrictions in Councilman Jamison's bill ensure that that will be the case. There are numerous people on my block and in my neighborhood who didn't know that they needed a permit until this issue came up, and they were reluctant to come and speak in support for fear of jeopardizing their personal situation and income and livelihood. I would say that that there are other good and just reasons for this bill to pass. Telecommunications technology being what it is, it's possible for people to work at home without disruption to their neighbors, and that simply wasn't the case when this existing ordinance was passed in 1979. Additionally, having folks at home represents additional community presence during the day when your police department will tell you statistically most property crimes are taking place in residential areas. Most of our neighborhood watch volunteers in my community, the original ones and myself included, work at home and are home during the day, and I think that that's a good thing for the safety of our neighborhood as well. That's all I have to say on the matter at this time, and I look forward to the substitute bill as it's being developed, and I know that there's a lot of neighbor input going into that, and I hope that it's something that the entire community can support. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support? Seeing none, if you wish to speak in opposition, please come to the lectern.
My name is Patsy Bruce, and I live on West End in a mixed-use neighborhood. This bill effectively rezones, de facto rezoning, of over 600,000 pieces of residential property in our county. I do not think that it is something we need to consider doing. We have been very careful to do with conservation zoning, historic overlays, neighborhood by neighborhood. We all know that each of our neighborhoods is unique. Each street is unique unto itself. That being the case, we don't need to, with one fell swoop, rezone everything to allow some 12 visits every day to a home. If you have 300 homes in your neighborhood, taking the far out thought that 12 people might come to every one of those homes, you're talking about over 7,000 extra pieces of traffic in a neighborhood that has on its streets bikers, walkers, mothers pushing strollers, and no sidewalks. In many, many cases, I can refer you to lots of the neighborhoods with no sidewalks where people are walking in the street. I see no need to allow to open this. The argument that everybody's doing it was something my mother was appalled at when I would try it. So I say to you, the fact that these wonderful cities around the country are doing it is no reason for you, ladies and gentlemen, to consider it at all. Consider what we're talking about. Those cities, many do not have metropolitan government. We have metropolitan government, so they are dealing with a limited number of properties in a limited geographical district. So we're talking about county-wide here. I am for business at home. It's working the way it is. When we start bringing traffic in, that's another thing that I think we have to think about. Streets with no sidewalks are quite an issue for most of the people in the city, and I think you all know that. It allows business to be done in rental properties. Many of your constituents are against rental properties, the accessory bill, the cottage accessory bill. Why? They don't want any more rental property in their neighborhood. So now we're going to put businesses in those. So it's already being discussed to expand this beyond 5 days to 6 or 7 days. Mixed use means use it when the people are gone. Certainly on Saturdays, the people are not out of their homes. I beg you to give each citizen of Nashville an opportunity to have an opinion about this bill. I think Councilman Jameson's done a wonderful job talking to lots of people, but I've talked to lots of people he hasn't talked to. All I want is for them to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Floyd. I live at 222 Bonnebrook Drive. I'm affiliated as the Vice President with the Donaldson-Hermitage Neighborhood Association, and also I'm actively involved in the Google group Nashville Neighborhoods, the listserv. I'll tell you, this is something new. Folks don't really know about it. And while this may be a good bill, without community input from all different types of neighborhoods, it could come back to hurt us. So I applaud Councilman Jameson for opening community meetings, have a second public hearing if necessary, and I still worry about the burden it puts on the codes department. We still have lots of LED signs that are out of compliance in our area, and those poor guys are working on permits, and they're just overworked and undermanned, and I just want to make sure we put all the safeguards in place to make sure it's good for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council, I'm J.B. Loring. I live at 3132 Knobview Drive, Nashville. And I think everything's been said, and I remember when I was sitting there, I hated for people to get up and repeat over and over. So I will say one thing, that I bought a home in a neighborhood, a residential area. I'd like for it to stay residential. It won't be long until I will be approaching senior status in age, and I don't want to have to move. So I knew that. I knew that'd get a comment. But I am opposed to this bill. If people want to live in a neighborhood of commercial, there's plenty of places. There's thousands of vacant buildings, commercial buildings right now, and we certainly don't need to have the businesses moving into the neighborhood. And the old saying of it would be hard to enforce because there's so many already is just like saying, well, let's do away with all the stop signs because people still run them. And we just can't do anything that drastic. And I don't believe that our neighborhoods are ready for commercial. I've talked to hundreds of people, and most of the people don't even know anything about the bill. It's had very little publicity, and anytime you have a kind of county-wide bill, it's a danger to the general public. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman.
Hi, I'm Dave Pomeroy, 1813 Cedar Lane, Nashville. I'm the president of the Nashville Musicians Association, the Musicians Union, and this issue just sort of flared up here in the last 24, 48 hours or so, and there's been a lot of discussion, and I don't want to cast any dispersions on Mr. Jameson's motives, but just wanted to express the concern of many people in the music industry that by prohibiting home studios and putting them in the prohibited category with tattoo parlors and automotive repair and wrecker services, you know, we're a little dismayed about the company we're supposedly keeping, but it's just important to realize that in this day of technology, anybody with a cell phone has a recording studio in their pocket. And so if you're sitting at home watching TV and you're near your Mac computer, you have a studio. This is the musical sketchpad of the artists and the songwriters and musicians who make Nashville what it is and create our #1 export music. So I don't know if Mr. Jameson, if you would perhaps let us know if that's going to continue to be in the prohibited category or not, but just looking for some clarification and some understanding that there might be some pretty serious unintended consequences. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Chilton. I reside at 3506 Byron Avenue, Nashville. I've been there 22 years. We don't need any more business. We don't need signs acknowledging business. If people want to work out of their homes, it's great, but it's working the way it is right now. I think this encourages more businesses and our neighborhoods become a mixed use, and we just don't need it. We need to keep the traffic down, and that's why we live in in neighborhoods, is because we don't want to be in business areas. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of the council. I'm John Summers. I live at 5000 Wyoming Avenue. And as some of y'all know, I previously served in this council from both the 6th District, Councilman Jamison's, and also from the 24th District. Nashville has too many speeding cars. No question about it. In fact, I was probably speeding coming down here. So I have a solution. Why don't we raise the speed limit? That'll eliminate all the speeding. And we can increase the penalties, but let's not hire any police officers anymore. That's basically what this bill does when it comes to home businesses. There are really two issues here that are being confused and wrapped up into one. We already have a home occupancy permit. I have one for a home business. What I cannot do is I cannot have customers come into my house. That's an issue that probably needs to be addressed because there's a lot of people, because there's really no mechanism to make sure people know that they need to do that. But what this bill also does is it drives certain commercial uses and office uses into our residential neighborhoods. Businesses that we now require to be zoned commercial. And as was previously said, probably what bothers me most about this bill, and I've mentioned it to Councilman Jamison, and I love Councilman Jamison. He's one of the best and brightest people I've served with, but I really think this is a dumb bill. Not the enforcement part, but driving commercial into residential. And I don't say that in terms of questioning his intelligence, but sometimes as council members, and I've done it, we all try to think we can regulate it and make it right and all that, but at the end of the day, it's all about enforcement. It's all about enforcement. And we have not substantially increased our codes department's budget or the number of staff people that are actually doing inspections since probably the 1980s. That was one of the things that I asked for in the Fulton budget of 1985. So if the council wants to address the fact that we need more compliance with our home occupancy issue, I would support that. What I don't support is moving commercial businesses through a text change, because basically, as has already been mentioned, there are a couple of 100,000 people in this county that are going to get a zone change and they don't really know it because they don't keep up with the process, and the news media doesn't cover these type of issues, as y'all all know. And this has a lot of importance. And the thing is that if it happens, it won't be for a few months until someone has a problem, and we know what's going to happen. Y'all have all experienced it. They're going to call you if you're here in the next council, because they've already called codes and they haven't gotten any results from codes, because codes enforcement takes a long time, even under the best of circumstances. I would hope that you would not move this commercial use into residential neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councilman.
If you knew what the traffic was like out there right now, you'd appreciate that I really wanted to be here for this. Traffic is horrific. My name is Ron Ayler. I live at 4308 Wallace Lane. And I think there are a couple of issues related to the bill that disturb me. One is just the fairness doctrine. As was mentioned earlier, people move into a residential area because that's what they're looking for their home. That's what they're looking for to be able to raise their children in that environment. They want to be able to teach their kid how to ride a bike, walk a dog, jog, and not get run over by people trying to come to a home in a residential area and conduct business. So I think the fairness doctrine is one thing to keep in mind. The other is it's totally incompatible. It could have a negative effect on property values. There's obviously the chance of a lot of noise. The sign issue, I had to laugh when I read the bill, you know, a sign of 6 square feet. I had the, I don't know if it was a pleasure or not, of living in Montreal for a while, where they actually had a department called the Sign Police. I don't know that we can have sign police going out, and I can guarantee you people are going to violate that, and there will be bigger signs. There'll be signs closer to the road. There'll be people putting up
real estate type signs in their front yard, or putting directional arrows on poles to direct people to turn, and there won't be enforcement because there's just not enough people to go out there and do it. And I think at the end of the day, what will happen is that will pit neighbor against neighbor. The people who don't want the business there are going to object to the people parking on the street. They're going to object to the people backing out of regular residential driveways because they're going to pull in forward. They're going to back out, and I don't think there's anybody here that would say that you can back up as well as you can drive forward and see all the road and see the walkers and joggers and children. In the area of operating a business, I'm wondering, is there any provision for, if this were to go forward, for the code to require anyone getting a business license in this environment to have liability insurance coverage? Because if they're going to have people coming to their place of business, and although it talks about the fact that there only going to be 2 per hour, 8 per day, to me that's somewhat laughable as well. We all know if someone has a successful business, they're going to allow as many people as possible to come to their home and conduct that business. And who's going to enforce that? What's going to happen is neighbors are going to start to complain, and we'll pit neighbor against neighbor for parking violations, for too many people coming, for too much noise, for signs improperly placed. And I don't think that's what we want in our neighborhoods. I think it's totally counterproductive. So my major things would be, let's think about the safety issues. Let's think about property values. Let's think about what we want our neighborhoods to be for raising families, and keep the businesses in business districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, okay.
Sorry, I didn't want to walk in front of a speaker to get in line. My name's Sandra Carlton. I live on Mockingbird Road here in Nashville. And I'm most concerned about the alarming increase in traffic that I believe this would create. Our safety is going to be compromised, whether it's people walking or pushing strollers or whatever, with no sidewalks in a neighborhood such as mine and probably many of yours. We don't even have that to use. We're walking literally on the streets themselves. And I'm afraid this might be an accident waiting to happen. I've done some calculations for our neighborhood of about 400 businesses. If only a fourth of those had a business license for a home and they had 12 customers per day, 24 trips in and out of the neighborhood, that's going to mean 1,200 more cars in our neighborhood, 2,400 more trips. That's an unbelievable increase to me. And even with the lower emission vehicles now, I just can't believe that that could be offset by my neighbor who drives to his or her job, wherever that might be, out of the neighborhood and back into the neighborhood at the end of the day. And I do want to speak to the point about perhaps lowering home burglaries. In our neighborhood, people who work at home work. They don't peer out the windows or sit on the front porch unless they're retired. And the people I know who are retired pretty much recognize the cars that are in and out of the neighborhood on a regular basis. If you add all those business customers, the folks who are coming in, casing the joints, would just blend right in with all those other cars. There's no way that that would be a help, I don't think, or a deterrent for potential crime. And as to the rental property point, I'd like to expand on that a little bit as well. I'm afraid that maybe in some of your neighborhood, as in ours from time to time, we have some absentee landlords who aren't as interested in the good of the neighborhood as they are in collecting the rent and having no problems. And I'm afraid that they will be quick to realize that they can probably collect an increased monthly rental when they can sell it as both a residence and a business. And I don't really think they have the best interests of the neighborhood at heart. So, in closing, I'd just like to ask you to please vote no on expanding home occupation into our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would move to defer this to the first meeting in June with an explanation.
Councilman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would like to take and have requested a little additional time to speak to you tonight. Although this is being deferred, use this opportunity to highlight the problems with the current version of the bill, that regardless of your perspective on the proposed ordinance, I think we'll all hopefully agree that the current version of the code is unsustainable. The current code allows home-based businesses, and that came as a lot of surprise to some neighborhood organizations that didn't want businesses within neighborhoods. And what I had to say to them, unfortunately, is that is allowed today. On the face of the bill, what I think you will see is that it tends to under-regulate other areas that cities have regulated and over-regulate areas that the public doesn't want regulated. Specifically, although we allow home-based businesses today, we have no regulation over such things as deliveries. So I can set up a home-based business and have the FedEx truck show up 20 times a day, and that's perfectly in keeping with the code. There are no hours of operation restrictions. I can work 24 hours a day, be up all night, and there's no restriction within our code that other cities have seen fit to restrict. The restriction that is imposed on this code since originally adopted years ago was the prohibition on on-site clients. And that prohibition on clients, on customers, and patrons distinguishes us from the rest of the country in a way that I'll touch on in a moment. But the face of the bill, as you read it, it's just a one-page bill, has some complexion problems at the outset. But the real problems with the bill are registered by the numbers that if you look at those. Today we have 203 home occupation permits issued in Davidson County. But if you go pull the business permits and cross-reference those that are on properties that are residentially zoned, it's more than 203. In fact, it's just under 8,000. It's 7,879. And I suspect that you could probably double that number at least, because those are the people that are trying to do the right thing. They're going to get their business permit. They just don't know that they need the home occupation permit. And sure enough, when the U.S. Census Bureau data came out just about 2 months ago, one of the questions asked, where do you work? And about 13,000 Nashvilleians said, I work from home. But again, 13,000 with only 203 home occupation permits. The current system just clearly is not capturing the reality of what's going on. What I've done to do this in the most discreet manner I know is to place on your desk a simple sheet of paper with a number on it. That number is the number of business permits pulled for residentially zoned properties. That's the number minus average 4 or 5 per that number. That's the number of illegally operating home businesses in your district today. And by illegal, I mean the grandmother who's teaching children piano in her living room, or the architect who's seeing one client at a time in his dining room, or the voice coach, or the tutor, or the yoga instructor, all of whom contribute to society, all of whom don't have a clue that they are public enemy number one, but all of whom I think you probably want to allow to continue working in their homes. And I think most Nashvilleians would want piano instruction, yoga instruction, voice coaches, licensed massage therapists, violin teachers to continue having that average, that income. But here's the real crux. 13,000 people are doing this today. How many codes complaints have there been? And if you call Karen West at the Codes Department and ask her, in my district, how many complaints have there been based on home occupation violations? And it's few, if any. I can't remember the last time I got any sort of home occupation related complaint at all, and yet that 13,000 number is what's going on. There was one speaker tonight who had a complaint and used that as an example of the ineffectiveness of codes. And I asked him, give me the address of that person that's violating the home business provisions. Gave me the address, I called Codes. Codes has never gotten a complaint about that business. So we can't elaborate on the inefficacy of codes when in fact they're not getting complaints from their registered, from their neighbors and from the people around them. So not only is it prevalent, but it's actually advertised. There were various members of the council and friends who alerted me to listserv discussions about this topic. And yes, there was great dynamic discussion about the issue, but on those same listserv discussions, there were ads for voice coaches and tutors and violin instructors. Here's one today posted at 2:51 from Joanna. I'm teaching a yoga class Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. at my house. That's great, Joanna, but that's illegal. And nobody wants that to be illegal, but that's the silly state of the current law that hasn't been amended in 15 years. If you've got more time to kill, go to Craigslist and look up any sort of personal service. And in every one of your districts, there are ads like, I presently teach out of my home, tutoring and private instructing. That's in Councilman Claiborne's district. Students may come to my home in Green Hills and learn violin from Mr. Kenny Kidd. In-home guitar lessons taught at my home. K through 8 tutoring offered in-home. All of those are reasonable and legitimate businesses from people contributing society, and they're all illegal. 2 months ago, the Tennessean had a front page spread on supper clubs. Great new trend. You bring $5, your friend buys for 20 people ingredients to cook a chef's meal. That's wonderful, and I applaud the camaraderie. It's illegal, and none of you want it to be illegal. None of you genuinely want those sorts of businesses to be prohibited under the code. If you've got even more time to kill, go to the classified ads in the Tennessean or the city paper and look at the number of in-home businesses that are offering services to clients in their living rooms today, and ask yourself if you genuinely want that to be prohibited still. The last 48 hours, the predominant number of emails came from those concerned about the recording studio in their homes, and they were all concerned that it was going to be prohibited by this bill. That's not the intent, it's not going to be in the final version, and it wasn't in the original draft. But what I had to tell each and every person who wrote is that that is currently illegal. We got emails today from Mr. J.D. Simo, who wrote, "I and many of my fellow men and women make their living as musicians depending upon the producers and engineers who run home studios for our living." Another email today from Matt Rowley, who wrote, "I have a wife and 2 children that depend on the income I make from using a home studio. I met with the Recording Institute of America, the people who put on the Grammys, all of whom made clear that home recording studios are the essential link to Nashville's recording industry, and I had to give them the great news, guess what? It's illegal, and nobody wants that to be illegal." So if you have any of these businesses in your district, I would give you 3 predictions. Number 1, that individual is operating an honest business and trying to make a decent living doing it, because they probably need that ability. Number 2, they don't have a clue that they're illegal and never knew that. And number 3, the reason they never knew that is because you never got a complaint about it, ever. Which leads me to the conclusion that while we want piano teachers and photographers and architects and lawyers and, yes, council members who see constituents in their living room to keep being able to do that because they do contribute to society, the question that arises when you're trying to address a codes problem like this is, how do other cities handle this? And you all know that we look at other cities' comparable legislation to see, can we do what they do? How do they handle this problem? If you look at the peer cities in Nashville and Tennessee, the ones we always compare ourselves to, Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, the Big Four, the satellite cities that surround us, Brentwood, Franklin, all of them, without exception, allow on-site clients. Then go to our friends at the Chamber of Commerce and ask them, who are the peer cities that we compare ourselves to? And they'll give you 12. The 12 they'll give you: Indianapolis, Charlotte, Raleigh, Louisville, which is a metropolitan form of government, Birmingham, Austin, Tulsa, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Oklahoma City, Atlanta. Those are, according to the Chamber of Commerce, our peer cities who we emulate, and all of them, without exception, allow on-site clients. Look at other cities that you may have heard referenced compared to Nashville. Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, cities that are known for the integrity of their neighborhoods, and all of them allow on-site clients. I can't find a single city in the United States that prohibits on-site clients. And so when we have the community meeting on May 24th, I would ask the opponents of the measure to please do me 3 favors. Number 1, find one city, not 50, not 10, one that adopted on-site clients and then suffered any of the calamities that you predict with respect to commercial encroachment. Because as I travel to these cities, I see healthy, vibrant neighborhoods. And lastly, please remember that not everybody has the wherewithal to own a home and the ability to own a separate work location. They need this ability. Thank you.
Councilman Gatto?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I just had one question of the sponsor. He indicated that we would have another public hearing after all of this is vetted out. My question is, will that public hearing be on a regular scheduled council night? And if not, would he stipulate to that?
Yes, it will. The request is, and under the rule, just so there's no misunderstanding, under the rule is we're allowed to have an additional public hearing with the council's permission if 2/3 of you approve it. I think you're all going to want to hear that public input, so I anticipate near unanimous approval. Under the rules, I have to make that request one meeting before that scheduled meeting. So by deferring this to the first meeting in June, it's at that meeting that I'll ask for the public hearing at the next regularly scheduled council meeting, the third Tuesday in June. Thanks.
Councilman Birch.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I had a question for Mr. Cooper. If this ordinance were to pass and become law, would it usurp neighborhood covenants, existing HOA neighborhood covenants? Like if
no, that's a private contractual matter relationship between the homeowners. So they're bound by those restrictive covenants. The local government does not enforce those.
Could you compare that then to like neighborhood covenants that restrict on-street parking and the difficulty that we have battling with codes and with the police department, where that seems to usurp the neighborhood covenants?
Well, I mean, under Metro law, you can park on a public street unless there's a sign. The Traffic and Parking Commission has, dedicated that as a no parking zone. Now, if your homeowners association prohibits on-street parking, Metro does not come in and enforce that and ticket you for that because it's not a violation of Metro law. But the homeowners association itself can issue a notice or citation, however they enforce that.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I thought you'd have the best take on it. But you see, you understand the problem that I'm talking about. We already have this issue where it seems that a city ordinance usurped the authority of the homeowner association. And this it seems like that it would do it again. We'd have that same problem. So I know this is being deferred. I just want that to be vetted as well when we come back.
Councilmember Evans.
Madam Chair, if Mr. Jameson has any more comments, I just want to yield my time to him because I think he had more to say.
I can always use 3 more or 4 more minutes, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Council Lady Evans. A couple other points that I think are important to make note of. In what turned out to be one of my last conversations with Sonny West about this bill that began last summer, what Mr. West pointed out was that the problem with the current bill that's on the books today is the impossibility of distinguishing between a social and professional visitor. And so therefore, with a business, say for example a recording studio, if they had a violin player and guitarist and singer over, that's all illegal today. But when the codes inspector showed up at the door to say you're not allowed to do that, what did they all say? That was a social visitor. That was my brother-in-law, my golfing partner, my whatever, and we're powerless to enforce that. So what you have, as you'll see in most other cities and adopted in this version, is that if you set a number for on-site clients, you make that absolute. Now right now the proposal is 12 based upon what other cities have suggested, 12 per day maximum, but that's everybody. Everybody. So when the postman shows up and the meter reader shows up and your lawn boy shows up, that's 3 down. But the beauty is you can't then say to the codes inspector, they were social guests. It doesn't count. It doesn't matter. And you've now eliminated that impossibility of enforcement that we have with the current version. But the other problem, as I was noting at the beginning of the bill, is that we don't regulate those aspects that other cities see fit. For example, deliveries and hours of operation. Other cities see fit to allow on-site clients, but in a way that's regulated so that you preserve the residential sanctity of the home, and that's what's done here. You have restrictions on visitors, on hours of operation, on deliveries, and so forth. There are other notification provisions in the current draft, and we're still debating how that is best to be applied, but with an application process that finally requires you to notify adjacent neighbors, requires some process through the Board of Zoning Appeals, and requests notification to the district council member. And while I finally respect and understand the analogy being made to a speed limit, if everybody wanted to drive 80, 90 miles per hour, we just set the speed limit at 80, 90 miles per hour. The problem with that analogy is this. If everybody drove 80, 90 miles per hour, the number of fatalities would increase dramatically, the energy consumption would increase dramatically, there'd be real harm. And so then you restrict back. And if you're saying now, well, just because other people do it, we shouldn't permit it. No, the question is, if people are doing it, if 13,000 people are doing it, but you're not getting any complaints, and if we're genuinely not getting the number of complaints that you see on your desk, then at some point, yes, the law has to be a reflection of what the community consensus is. I've got 191 of these in my district, and nobody's ever once complained about them. And all of these individuals are paying taxes, making honest living, doing things that we want. For 6 months, I took my kids to a piano teacher in Inglewood, Councilman Craddock. Didn't have a clue it was illegal, and when I found out, I stopped. But I don't want that little lady to not be able to make an income. I don't want people who rely on a recording industry, home recording studio, to make a living, as most of the emails that you've been getting for the last 48 hours have pointed out. If the current version of the law remains on the books, every home recording studio email that you got to respond to and say, you're out of business. And that's not what we want to see, I think, in this economy. Thank you.
We are on the motion to defer to the first meeting in June. Councilmember Claiborne.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would just like to congratulate Councilman Jamison on all of the hard work and long hours that he has obviously put in on this, and I would also like to recognize the passion that he has for this. And I would also like to thank him for making good on a promise to point out the infractions in District 15 after I spoke against this proposal at the Planning Commission last Thursday. Thank you, Councilman Jamison.
More discussion on the motion to defer. Councilmember Wilhoit.
Previous question.
All in favor of previous question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're now on the motion to defer to the first meeting in June. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion to defer passes. Next is BL 2011-878, changes .56 acres from CS to SP zoning for property located at 2610 Lebanon Pike to permit automobile sales, new and used, and automobile service. Councilman Claiborne.
Open a public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilman Claiborne.
Move for passage.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-879 changes 40.8 acres from RS 7.5 to SP zoning for properties located at 5,000 Mountain Springs Road and at Hobson Pike Unnumbered, north of Hobson Pike, to permit 219 multifamily dwelling units. Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Please proceed with the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. At this time, I'd like to offer an amendment to Bill 2011-879.
Okay.
The nature of the amendment is to allow the natural vegetation to remain, so it will become a buffer between Summersville and the new townhomes that's created. Have other comments, but that's the nature of this amendment.
We have a motion on the amendment. Is there a second? Second. Councilman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. In addition to that amendment, we've worked constantly with the neighbors over the last year, and there's some other things that I want to caution the neighbors that we've tried to do to make sure that the homes in the Summersville subdivision were not compromised, such as to make sure that the material that the townhomes will be built out of will be the same as Summersville or greater. At the same time, they had some concerns about Shagbar Drive. We've done a lot of work to make sure that we minimize the traffic coming out on Shagbar Drive. In addition to that, Councilman Duvall has pointed out to me that we should go back before third reading and to make sure that these are single family owned, single individually owned. Is that correct? Individually owned. Single individually owned, to make sure that these townhomes don't become apartments down the road. So I want the neighbors to know in Summersville that we've had a lot of meetings, and we really want to make sure that they are not burdened by the new townhomes. Having said that, I move for approval of the amendment.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The amendment passes.
I'd like to move the bill as amended.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of the bill as amended, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next is BL 2011-880, makes provisions to 17.18 acres of an urban design overlay to be known as the Primrose UDO to properties located at Primrose Circle, Primrose Avenue, west of Brightonwood Avenue to apply design standards. Councilmember Lalonde.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Raise your hand if you're in opposition. Would anyone in support wish to speak? Please come to the lectern and state your name and address.
2949 Primrose Circle. I've lived in Brentwood in the past. A lot of big houses. Didn't have much charm for me. 6 years ago, moved into this little neighborhood. It's just a small little niche, 2 streets between Belmont and Hillsborough, kind of just inside 440. It's the charm of the small cottages was part of the reason I moved in. It was about a year ago. One of them got flattened and replaced with a big box duplex. I think that's what triggered this bill. I don't oppose to houses being taken out when they're old and replaced with some that are compatible with the neighborhood, but there need to be restrictions on how it's done. So I support the overlay.
Thank you. Anyone else in support wishing to speak? Anyone in opposition wishing to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity. I'm just going to say a few sentences. My wife maybe has some more specifics, but yeah, we're opposed, and we've
Would you please state your name and address,
I'm sorry,
please?
Bruce Siegel. We live at 1844 Primrose Avenue, and this is my wife, Dong. We've lived there for about 4.5 years, and yeah, we're against it. We just think in general that it puts unnecessary restrictions into the area, into the market. I realize we're just a little parcel of land. I think there was a total of 17 acres or whatever, but like I said, it's just, we're against it. It's going to distort the market. It's going to actually, the limited supply of, and that's a really popular area. It's going to raise the prices, I think, of the land outside of that area, and the land that's right in this overlay. It may well long run hurt the values there and the aesthetics. So yeah, we just it's not necessary, and we're against it. You had some more specifics, maybe.
Well, I think my opinion to this.
You may want to pull the microphone down.
My personal feeling is that this is something that's trying to impose on individuals' willingness, and actually, like my husband said, it surprised the market based on a few people's opinions. All this has started because one house didn't like, the neighbor was taking down the old house. It was really run down with probably miles flood, everything. Nobody said anything before. After they taking the house down and build it, and we will agree that the house probably is a little bit outrageous as far as to fit the neighborhood characters. So, but the immediate neighbor just didn't like it and then go start this petition about this. But my point of view is that it's not so much as, you know, how big the house is, and, you know, it's using that to restrict individuals like us. You know, we can't even make a decision on our own. You know, for example, the restriction of the code said, okay, the neighborhood was built in 1940 something. It's in 1.5 storage, basically storage building. So any development can go over 1.5 storage levels. I think that's just a little bit too much.
Thank you.
I would just moderate, you know, for this petition. Okay.
To allow more, like.
Yeah, 2 stories is reasonable.
Thank you.
Stories.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Lalonde.
Yes, I'd like to move the legislation with a brief statement, please.
Have a motion and a second.
I just wanted to say that my thank you to the neighborhood. We've been working on this for more than a year. We've had several meetings along the way, really working to have the right size tool for the issues that exist in this part of my district. Most of my district is under conservation overlays. This is a part of the district that is not. This is a piece of legislation that's less strict than a conservation overlay. It really deals with height and mass and setback. It allows people to build additions, to tear houses down and build new homes. They can build very large homes with this. It's just that they cannot build houses that loom and tower over their neighbors and that are completely out of keeping with the character of the neighborhood. I am very excited, actually. I know I was talking to somebody earlier that this makes me a true nerd. I'm very excited about this piece of zoning legislation because I think it does, and the planning staff is laughing and nodding because they're excited about it too, because it does what we want it to do. It does not take a sledgehammer and hit a fly. It's the right size. It does not unduly restrict the ability of the neighbors on Primrose and Primrose Circle to build and to add on and to make the most of their property. Indeed, it just respects the community, respects the neighborhood, and I think is going to bring great things to that part of my district. So I'd like to again reassert my moving approval for this. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-881 changes 3.28 acres from CS to SP zoning for property located at 520 Collins Park Drive to permit auto sales and automobile service within an existing facility. Councilmember Coleman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Neighbors. Please proceed with the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Anyone in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Coleman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move for passage and wish to give a brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman.
Thank you. Neighbors in the Antioch area, you know where the Collins Park Drive is, right beside Bell Road going under the interstate where the old Cracker Barrel used to be. This is going to be a huge improvement to that area. As you know, over the last few years, the businesses have moved out, but with this drive time coming, it's going to really improve, along with Freeland Chevrolet bringing in their new dealership. So we're going to have a lot of competition. It's going to build up that view from the interstate, and I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the Hickory Hollow Parkway mouth coming in near the mall. So I thank you for your support, and thank you, Council.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-882 makes provisions to 0.52 acres of a neighborhood landmark district for property located at 5305 Pennsylvania Avenue, zoned R6. Councilmember Baker.
Open public hearing, please.
I need to defer.
Defer indefinitely.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of indefinite deferral, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-883 changes 1.22 acres from SP to DTC District for property located at 501 Church Street. Councilmember Jameson.
Move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-884 changes 1.33 acres from IWD to MUG District for properties located at 909, 913, and 1001 8th Avenue North. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would like to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you. I move for approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-885 changes 25.93 acres from RS-15 to SP zoning for properties located at 4124, 4140, 4144, and 4156 Central Pike and at 6002 South New Hope Road to permit a mixed-use development consisting of office, retail, commercial, restaurant, multifamily, and live-work uses. Councilman Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Raise your hand if you're in support. Okay. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Would anyone in support wish to speak?
Members of the council, my name is Tom White. I represent the applicant in this particular matter. At the front end, I want to thank Councilman Gatto, who's given a great deal of his time to hold several different neighborhood meetings and has also attended several meetings which were held at the Planning Commission building itself. This is a zoning which goes from RS-15 to SP. It's approximately a 26-acre site which runs between Central Pike and the interstate. A plan amendment was necessary. It was adopted and passed unanimously by the Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission considered this zone change and they approved it on a vote of 6-0. Councilman Gatto has encouraged us to continue to talk with the neighbors, which we've continued to do through this evening and as this bill moves forward. With respect to the issue that's generally one that comes to the forefront with this property, it's traffic improvements. My client's committed to significant traffic improvements, and I think the staff of the Planning Commission and the councilman will tell you my client has committed to every requirement, whether requested by the Public Works Department or any other Metro department with respect to their issues concerning the development of this property. We do not have unanimous support for this proposal. We think we've got significant support for it, but even those that are opposed to it, I think will tell the members of the council that they want significant improvements out there. They're not going to happen unless development takes place on this piece of property, which is significant. We respectfully ask that you approve this matter tonight. Let it continue on with the process. Thank you for your courtesies.
Joe Epps with Anderson, Delk, Epps & Associates. We want to thank the community for their input. We want to thank the councilman for all his hard work in this, and we just seek your support for this proposal. Thank you.
I'm Bobby Cloyd, and we live at 6002 South New Hope Road. And we've lived there for 49 years since me and my wife married, and she was raised on the property before the interstate come through. And we're in favor of getting ours rezoned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dan Lyles, live at 5590 John Hager Road. And I drive past this property every day on my way to work, have for 20 years. And based on what I have been told, any improvements to the property would require road work, and if it helps the traffic situation that I've had to deal with for so many years, I'm for this proposal. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in support who wishes to speak? Seeing none, please come to the lectern if you wish to speak in opposition.
Madam Chairman, members of the council, I'm Richard Benson. I live at 4169 Central Pike, right in the middle of this mess. I am completely against this proposed zoning and sub-area plan, which it has been at some point in time, both of these, for Central Pike. The existing plan that has been put in place by Metro government basically has not protected us in this area of our property rights. As a lifelong resident of Hermitage and owner of the oldest business in Hermitage, I believe that this is just a continued decline of our area of Hermitage. This corridor is a very important corridor to our area there. I'm a resident there, have been a resident there since 1965. And there's several other elderly families there where this was originally set up as a subdivision. These were all divided as 3-acre subdivision lots, and when the sub-area plan was put into effect, it did not take into account that this is where we had been and this is where he had been developed previously. There have been no answers given to the major problems that will be created by this development, including a tremendous water problem, which was presented to the Planning Commission and was, as far as I was concerned, completely overlooked in their consideration. There has been a never-ending traffic problem, and we have had promises unfulfilled many years that these problems were going to be eliminated. They're not. Hermitage now has a major crime problem throughout this community due to the poor planning of developments that have already previously been put into place in this area. In conclusion, there are too many unused retail office spaces, too many unused apartment complexes that have recently been changed to low-income housing. There are too many motels that have been changed over to weekly and monthly rentals. There are too many homes for sale in the community. And to add anything to this would definitely be a problem as far as I'm concerned as for our neighborhood. And as a longtime resident of Hermitage, what I'm interested in seeing is we need more citizens of Hermitage. We do not need just more people who just live there and come in there and work. And this extension of this corridor is a very important thing. There's only about a half a mile left to the edge of the county. And Wilson County is not going to continue to the type of development that they're willing to put here.
My name is Sandra Eastep, and I live at 4031 Dodson Chapel Road. I've lived in the same house since 1972. You've heard all about the traffic problems, and anybody that's been to Hermitage knows that it's absolutely horrendous, especially there at Central Pike and Old Hickory Boulevard. It's going to take more than this developer can do to satisfy that problem. They want to put up 3-story live-work buildings in a 1-story neighborhood. These buildings aren't all together, they're scattered out. Okay, the residents that live, the long-time residents that live between these buildings are going to lose every bit of the quality of life and the enjoyment they have of their property. They'll go to bed at night listening to doors slamming at the nearby restaurants, people watching them in their backyards. There's no way if you have a 1-story house and there's a 3-story building next to you, there's no way you can have any privacy. The lighting that will be required in these new places is going to make it like daylight 24/7, 365 days. In Alaska, at least, they do get 6 months of darkness once in a while. The argument that this developer has tried to use to get some of these residents to go along is that I don't have any plans for this for the next 5 years. Well, then let him come back in 5 years. Things will probably change. Hopefully the traffic situation will change. These residents and their quality of life should not be held hostage by the developer. If you approve this plan, you are putting the gun in his hand. Because if they decide to move, there's nobody that'll buy their property except that developer. He is the only one that will benefit from this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Susan Floyd and the Vice President of the Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. I live at 222 Bonnellbrook Drive. And I come to you on behalf of our Board of Directors and President Lou Ann Brown. I believe we're talking about the property on the interstate side, correct? To us, this is more the area that we would put the live-work community that is proposed for the opposite side that sits between where these folks live. Let the road serve as a buffer. If we want to explore new development types, let that be on the interstate side. Now we're talking this interstate side, they want large development, restaurant and retail. It can't be single family. It's not really a good place anymore for that. But let it be planned and zoned so it's not harmful to the folks across the street. Traffic is a nightmare. In fact, when I talked with the developer, and talking about a turning lane, and he said, well, maybe that's kind of really the suicide lane. We have to improve on traffic out that way. The development that's proposed for across the street puts two multi-family, multi-story units on single-family lots. That's too large. So we would propose that we build something non-invasive, more live work on the interstate side, and then protect the neighbors on the opposite side and let them continue to have the residential feel in the Central Pike area as well as the Valley Grove neighborhoods. Councilman Lady Belong was talking about building big buildings that tower over other neighbors. That's what's proposed on the other side. Let that be on the interstate side. Let it tower over the pickup trucks or the semis. That's fine. So we appreciate your time and your considerations.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Benson and I live at 4169 Central Pike. I'm completely opposed to this rezoning issue. There's no way around the fact that Central Pike is a state road. There's nothing that Metro can do, as far as I know, is getting the road widened to accommodate this traffic. So that's just one issue that I'm opposed to.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I want to move to defer this indefinitely with a very brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second.
Thank you. I want to defer this indefinitely tonight because we, quite frankly, have not been able to meet enough to work out a lot of the issues that surround this proposal. And at the end of the day, I don't know if we're going to get consensus with the neighborhood and the developers about what we should and shouldn't do. I do have some concerns about this piece of property, but I'm going to reserve that explanation until this comes back for whatever the final resolution is. I will say that to clear up any confusion, I have two zoning bills tonight. The next one is going to be two down from this, and they're both on Central Pike, and they're directly across Central Pike from each other. Those that spoke in opposition tonight live on the north side of Central Pike. This zoning is for the south side of Central Pike across the street, and there's two very different dynamics driving those two zonings. But at the end of the day, we're going to have something that the neighbors can live with, and that the developer agrees to, and all the issues that have been brought forth tonight are absolutely right. Traffic is the number one. That's the number one thing that's the problem out there. So having said that, I renew my motion to defer this indefinitely, and I will add that I do plan to do that for the other zoning bill as well. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second for indefinite deferral. Councilman Stanley, Councilman Crafton?
I have a quick question.
On indefinite deferral.
Either that or you can wait till the vote's done, and then I want to ask you, it's pertaining to this type of zoning, your choice.
Are you asking Councilman Gatto?
I'm going to ask our legal attorney.
Ask away.
Okay, thank you. and I support Councilman Gatto, but I had a question. It just struck me as I sat there and listened, and of course the neighbors had some legitimate concerns, but talked about the developer. You know, the developer agreed to widen the road, and they agreed to do this and do that in order to get the zoning. Let me ask you this. If a property has the correct zoning, is it legal for, and this is in a generic sense, not this case at all, is it legal to create kind of a quid pro quo situation where the planning commission says, okay, if you do this, you know we got a horrible road out here and we don't have enough taxes to fix it, but if you'll fix it, you know, then we'll support your zone change, or we'll let you get 15 extra units, or we'll give you a favorable recommendation to the planning commission, or the councilman says, well, we'll pass it if you do this. Are we allowed to do that?
There's a fine line between improvements that are necessary for the good of the community to make the development work and what could be considered contract zoning or some kind of unlawful quid pro quo. The conditions that the Planning Commission recommends, I have not seen any that I believe rise to the level of not being what they have the authority to do.
And I want to say that I'm not disagreeing with anything they recommended. I just wanted to know from a general term, and you've kind of answered that. It's kind of a fine line, and okay.
All in favor of indefinite deferral, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-886 amends 39.53 acres of the Carrion Plan Unit Development Overlay District for property located at Bell Road Unnumbered, north of Couchville Pike, zoned MUL and RM9 to permit 452 multifamily units. Councilman Birch.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Birch.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. If it's appropriate time, I have an amendment to offer.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to, Mr. Cooper, if he would, to explain that amendment.
The amendment adds three additional conditions to the list of conditions that are included on the plan. Specifically, it restricts building materials, requires that a pre-blast survey be done for residential properties in the adjacent subdivision that are within 300 feet of the boundary, and also a requirement that the homeowners association of the adjacent subdivision be notified when the final PUD site plan is submitted.
Thank you. With that explanation, I'd like to move approval on the amendment.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Opposed, no. The amendment passes. Councilman?
I would like to move the bill as amended with a brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just want to really commend the neighborhood and the applicant on this PUD amendment and the work that was done on it. Really, when we started, we were pretty far apart as far as what the applicant wanted and what the neighborhood wanted, and we had a lot of meetings and negotiations were made, and we came up with really a plan I think that everybody's can live with and may not necessarily be happy with to some extent, but I think the consensus is going to be good for the neighborhood. And so I just want to thank the neighbors for their support and the applicant for his willingness to negotiate. So with that, I'll renew my motion for approval.
All in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-887, changes .22 acres from RS5 to SP zoning for property located at 605 26th Avenue North to permit a two-story multifamily building consisting of a maximum of 9 residential units. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Could you open the public hearing, please?
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Langster.
With that, Vice Mayor, I move that we approve, please.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-888 changes 6.68 acres from RS15 to SP zoning for properties located at 4161 and 4193 Central Pike to permit up to 135 multifamily units consisting of either live-work units, flats, and/or townhomes. Councilmember Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Anyone in support wishing to speak?
I live at 4121 New Hope Meadow Road. I'm in a subdivision around the corner. I know there's a lot of this that's going on, Mr. Gatto. When you say indefinite suspension or indefinite, do you have a time frame on when we're going to meet on this property again as far as what's going on? Unfortunately, I've been traveling a lot, and I know with our homeowner association meeting that we had not too long ago, there's a lot of really good things that are happening, which one I think would relieve a lot of the flooding that we've seen over there. But do you have any idea on a new time frame?
Yeah, well, the indefinite deferral, I'm not sure. We have some more meetings to handle. I will roll off of this council at August the 31st. So we will deal with this between now and the third Tuesday in August, one way or the other. So that about 90 days is the most it would do. The reason I asked for indefinite deferral is because I didn't want to have to keep coming back and ask for another deferral I don't know how long this process will take.
I understand there is a little house over there that I think the developer has taken up office in. Does he have a model plan of what he expects this area to be?
Excuse me, this is the time for public comment. If you want to ask the councilman questions, we can do that after the meeting.
Let me just urge you to make sure I have your address, email address, or whatever, and I'll make sure you get all of the meeting notices so that you can come, and that's when all these types of questions will be answered, and we'll be very, quite frankly, we have a straw man right now, but we really don't have a detail, a plan with all the details that need to be in it. So.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor, neighbors, members of the council, my name is Tom White. I represent the applicant in this matter. One more time, I want to thank Councilman Gatto for the time that he gave to us. This is the flip side of the property that he recently mentioned as we discussed. The previous piece of property was 26 acres on the south side of Central Pike. This is a 6.6 acre site which is on the north side. One more time, the staff of the planning department viewed this matter at length. The staff recommended approval. It was approved by the Planning Commission on a vote of 8-0. The same issues that the staff recommended approval in part on the other side were applicable here. They felt like it gave walkability, it gave varied housing, and one more time I'll make the comment that all the issues you've heard from those that are in opposition, because this is not unanimous on one side or the other, have to do with traffic problems on Central Pike, flooding, and other issues. Those issues are not going to get corrected with Metro government dollars. It's going to get corrected by a developer coming in there, and no one has yet said anything other than that. So if we're looking for some traffic improvement on Central Pike, if we're looking for some of the issues with the stormwater and flooding issues, it's only going to happen with legitimate development dollars. Hopefully that'll come about in a combined agreement between my client and the neighbors that are affected. We appreciate your courtesies. Ask you to move forward on this one. I ask the councilman to close the public hearing tonight, move this indefinitely. We'll continue to meet as you've asked us to with the neighbors that are affected. Thank you for your courtesies.
Thank you.
Joe Epps with Anderson, Delk, Epps & Associates. Again, we'd like to thank the councilman and the members of the community for attending the meetings and everything else. We'll continue to work with them, and we're asking for your support on this. Thank you.
Hello again, Dan Lyles, 5590 John Hager Road. I guess I'm going to sing the same old tune again. We need help with the traffic on Central Pike, and if this development brings it, I'm all for it. Thanks.
Anyone else in support wishing to speak? Seeing none, anyone in opposition wishing to speak?
My name is Stephen Willis. I live at 4332 Central Valley Drive, directly behind Mr. Benson here. The traffic's already been covered. For me, my opposition has nothing really as much to do with traffic or flooding. It has to do with the fact that my property butts right up against this, and he wants to build a 3-story apartment building looming over my house. Not just one, but several of them. The plan, as I've seen it, has the dumpster for this complex right, behind my property. I'm concerned about, noise from, emptying of that dumpster, smell, privacy, with people on balconies looming right into my backyard. This is a big thing for me. We purchased this house in part because it has a lovely view. There's, trees, birds. We've been noticing a red-tailed hawk nesting in the woods right behind there. And as a further thing that the developers work with the neighbors, the developer has not yet come talk to me at all, though he's talked to several of my neighbors, but declined to come next door to talk to me about the concerns we have about the street lights, the noise, the smell, all of these items. So for me, it's about why would you drop 3-story apartment buildings in the middle of single-family, single-story residential homes and have them looming over all of these homes? And if you look at the plan, it's pretty much clear where he's leaving access for future reference, that for future access, that he is hoping one day to acquire every single home on that in that line to make one giant complex. It's pretty obvious from the plan. It's not what I purchased my house looking for. I purchased this property to enjoy my privacy, enjoy my backyard, without other people looming over it. I'm a respectful distance from Mr. Benson, and he and I have not had any privacy issues. But this really does change the game in a very big way. My wife and I are extremely opposed to this, and so we'd hope that you take that into consideration. Thank you.
I'm Susan Floyd, 222 Bonnebrook Drive, and I come to you again on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. We strongly oppose this proposed development on the north side. Here's the scenario. There are 13 3-acre lots all in a row. The developer has 2 lots, non-adjacent. In fact, there are 3 lots in between. They want to replace a single-family home with several multi-story buildings, so the neighbors who now have one neighbor would all of a sudden have 67 neighbors and a commercial development next door. This development at this location would destroy the residential feel of both the Central Pike neighbors as well as the neighbors of the Valley Grove community. Again, we suggest we explore this live-work type development on the opposite side of Central Pike, near the interstate. But stay away from the north side. Some of these folks have lived there since 1958, paying taxes at this location since 1958. We believe that their way of life should be protected, and we oppose any zone changes on that area. I want to say that we did support the Korean PUD with Councilman Birch and applaud him and his work and the neighbors and the steering committee. Those neighbors and the developer sat down and they worked and they worked and they chipped away and they gave and they take and they gave and they took, and they came out with a plan that was good. When neighbors and developers sit down and remember that it's the neighbors who have to live with what is there, that's how you create a good plan. So we applaud Councilman Gatto for putting the brakes on this until all things are right and all communication goes through and there's a really, really good plan that will increase and positively impact the neighbors, not destroy their residential way of life. So for this reason, we strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare, sorry.
I'm Bertha Ward, and I live at 4151 Central Pike. I live next door to the 4161, where the big apartment building will be. And we are a neighborhood, and we would like to stay a neighborhood. The house is on that side of the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Beth Benson, and I live at 4139 Central Pike. My husband and son and I live next door to Mrs. Ward, and we are opposed to this as well because even though we are on a very busy street, we do consider ourselves as homeowners, neighbors, and this is our neighborhood. It may not be a traditional neighborhood as we have in other areas in Nashville, but we are a neighborhood. And what the developer has proposed to us does not fit in a neighborhood setting. Our neighbors that just spoke talked about these buildings that they plan on dropping in between our homes. We are very fortunate to all along this stretch of Central Pike own 2.5 or more acres. We enjoy having that much acreage. We feel fortunate to have that, and we enjoy that because we do have our privacy. With these 3-story buildings that might come in, we will lose that privacy. Like I said, we are 2 houses away from one of these developments, but I will be able to walk out in my backyard and see these monstrosities in my neighborhood. We ask that you please do deny this zoning. The developer and the owner have told us in the past that they are not planning on doing anything with this property at this time. We respectfully ask them to come back at a different time then to ask for rezoning when they are ready to do something. Thank you very much.
I'm Richard Benson again from 4169 Central Pike, and this one piece of property in this at 41, I don't know the exact number, but it's my next door neighbor, where this again boils down to a common scenario that's happened in Hermitage. It happens all over Nashville. You've got developers, speculators who come in, buy a piece of land. In this case, they bought the piece of property next door to me. They're going to be building whatever they build. Ms. Vice Mayor, I will be able to sit on my patio and look at you if you're in a piece of property next door. That's how close they're going to be to me on my side of the road. This entire development, but this as you can see, the developer has properties on both sides of the road. All of these properties have previously been residences. They are zoned RS-15 now, which means that if he wanted to, yes, he could go there next door and he could take and build about 4 or 5 houses. But he can't make enough money off of the property that way. So he's got to go in and he's got to develop something big and fancy. And then I'd hope that we'll get mad and leave Davidson County. I have lived at this residence at 4169 Central Pike, as I said, since 1965. I am a 5-generation resident of Hermitage. My father lived at 4139 Central Pike before he passed away. Lived 92 years, and now my son lives in that home. All we wish is to just be left alone to where we can live out our days on our properties as we bought them and purchased them and have lived. And we ask nothing more. But I think it's unfair that Metro should be allowed to come in, and the property across the street is not the best property for development. It's nothing but a swamp. And whatever water problems that the Metro government thinks that they can alleviate, there has been, I think, a notice sent to you from the Lake Park Homeowners Association because I attended a meeting where they said that there was a major issue, that they had a major issue with this development. This is a major water problem there. And the traffic, a turn lane and a stoplight is not going to eliminate the traffic problem. The water problem, I can't imagine what they can do other than put another dam up and make another Percy Priest Dam on the other side of the road in order to eliminate this water problem. No causeway, no culvert, no anything is going to do this. So I would hope that the council in the future would look at this, and if they do nothing else, but just leave it as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilman Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. As I explained previously, the situation, I move to defer this indefinitely.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor of indefinite deferral, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Indefinite deferral passes. Next is BL 2011-889, changes 1.21 acres from CS and IWD to SP zoning for property located at 601 Gallatin Pike to permit a retail establishment. Councilman Craddock.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Call for the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you, I see you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Craddock.
Move approval.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-890 changes 2.22 acres from IWD to OG zoning for properties located at 250 and 260 Cumberland Bend. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you. I move for approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-891 changes 18.73 acres from ORI and IR to SP zoning for properties located at 329, 330, 331, 336, 337, 341, and 351 28th Avenue North and at 3000 Charlotte Avenue to permit a mixed-use development. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I move for approval with an explanation, please.
Have a motion and a second. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you. As you can see, it's quite a few property numbers listed here. We are still discussing the issue, but while we're discussing, I want to pass on second reading, but there's just a few technical things we need to look at, and all parties are talking very well with each other. So with that, I renew my motion for approval.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-892 changes 7.42 acres from RS-15 to AR-2A district for property located at 787 Lebanon Dirt Road and a portion of properties located at 795 and 799 Lebanon Dirt Road. Councilmember Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gatto.
I move approval with a very brief comment.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman.
This is my version of the former bill that became known as Operation Cluck Cluck, and I renew my motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-893 changes 1.89 acres from R10 to CL District for properties located at 2905 and 2907 Elm Hill Pike. Councilmember Stanley.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Mayor. I move for public hearing, please.
I will need to show the slides first.
This is BL 2011-893, and it's a request to rezone property located at 2905 and 2907 Elm Hill Pike. The property is outlined in red. The original request and the current council bill was to rezone this property to the CL zoning system, CL zoning district. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the CL and approval with conditions of an SP district. The range of uses allowed by the CL zoning district is too broad for this subject site. SP zoning can address the historical and natural resources associated with this site. The applicant has agreed to prepare an SP, and a substitute bill will be prepared prior to third reading. The current zoning is R10, which allows single and two-family residences on a minimum of 10,000 square foot lot. The CL zoning district allows a range of commercial uses. The SP district would allow a parking lot with protection for the natural and historic resources. The policy in place are commercial mixed concentration, which supports a range of commercial uses, and natural conservation on the portion of the property in the floodplain. This is a view of the property, and the Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the CL zoning district and approval of an SP district.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak?
I'm Susan Floyd, Vice President, Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. One thing, our board was perplexed that this property taken in a buyout from the airport authority, they pay no taxes on this land, yet now it would become a revenue source. And we were a little confused that we would take it from a homeowner and then all of a sudden turn around and use it to make money. We also want to make sure that the historical integrity of this area is protected. One of the oldest historical homes in the Nashville area, the Buchanan Log Home, sits right across the street from this. It was probably, I'm sure, part of the original property. The cemetery sits adjacent. Recent archaeological digs have discovered that there may be possible artifacts and even graves on this property. And using Councilman Forkum's new bill that we protect artifacts, we would ask that any artifact that's found in the development of this property not be kept with Metro, but turned over to the Buchanan Log Home as part of that treasure. And if there are any graves there, that we would stop development altogether and then donate that land back to the Buchanan Log Home. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Stanley.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, I move approval with
have a motion and a second, Councilman.
I will amend this bill on third reading to SP because the property, the parcel on which they want to locate this parking lot for the Airport Business Center, it is located directly contiguous with the Buchanan Cemetery. And Buchanan Cemetery is a historic site. I want us to take advantage of these historic sites to lay the foundation for our community in the future. And with that, I just asked the council for approval at this time.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-894 changes 0.76 acres from CS to MUL zoning for property located at 3710 North Natchez Court. Councilmember Page.
Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Page.
Move approval, please.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-895 changes 182.38 acres from R10 to RS10 zoning for various properties located along Bel Air Drive, Catalina Drive, Cornet Drive, Curry Road, McGavock Pike, and Vinson Drive. Councilmember Birch. Councilmember Dominy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We can have the slides, please.
This is Council Bill 2011-895, and it's request to rezone properties on Bel Air Drive, Catalina Drive, Cornet Drive, Curry Road, McGavock Pike, and Vincent Drive from R10 to RS10, and the properties are outlined in red. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of this request. The current zoning, R10, allows for single and two-family residences on a minimum 10,000 square foot lot. RS10 allows for single-family residences on a minimum 10,000 square foot lot. The land use policy is residential low-medium, and while the policy supports both zoning districts, the Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the request because limiting the area to single-family residences would provide few opportunities for housing diversity and choice.
Please raise your hand if you're in favor. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Dominy.
Vice Mayor, I move for approval and with a brief explanation.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman.
We've had 2 public meetings on from residents in this area. The 95.88% of them support this issue. I've had 7 requests to opt out, which I have agreed to do so currently, and we move for approval. And
is there an amendment that needs to be?
We'll offer those. I'll offer the ones that I have on 3rd reading because I was allowing anybody that came tonight to present their concerns, and I would opt them out tonight as well. So far, we've had 7, including 1 from Councilman Birch's district and 6 from mine.
Okay. Councilman Birch.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I want to go ahead and offer an amendment tonight to the bill. Mr. Cooper, if you would explain that.
This deletes the one of those parcels at 1224 Curry Road from the rezoning.
Thank you. I move approval on that amendment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Councilman Gatto, did you wish to speak?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I have a question for the planning staff. This bill was recommended for approval by the staff. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the bill as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-896 amends the Metro Code by revising the signage compliance deadline. Councilmember Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just move to open the public hearing. Thank you,
please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. PL 2011-897 amends the Metro Code by revising the definitions associated with street designations and by modifying the measurement of street setbacks for multifamily and non-residential districts and non-residential uses in AGAR 2A, R, and RS districts. Councilmember Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gatto.
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is PL 2011-898, amends the Metro Code to add the following alternative zoning districts and a mixed-use multifamily and office districts to create walkable neighborhoods through the use of appropriate building placement and bulk standards as an alternative to a zoning district that requires a site plan. Councilman Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gatto.
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-899 amends the Metro Code by adding a definition for alley sign, modifying the definition for hanging sign, and providing provisions for alley signs. Councilmember Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Are you in support? You're in opposition. Okay. Would you wish to speak?
1114 Sharp Avenue. I'm very happy that there's legislation on tap allowing for signage in alleys, but I fear that the size of those signs hasn't been well thought out. As the planning department strongly encourages parking in the rear of buildings and requiring it for new construction and encouraging it for existing construction, the rear of the building essentially becomes the front. What's on tap right now is a 2x2 sign, which is actually smaller than an open newspaper. There's no way that a business can convey its vital information to customers in such a small sign. Most business owners are allowed 2 48-square-foot signs in the front of their buildings. I'm certainly not suggesting a sign that large is necessary in the rear, but I don't think one 10 times smaller is reasonable either. I also found it interesting that in Mr. Jameson's legislation about the home-based businesses, they're allowed 6 square feet. That's for just, is that correct? That's what the bill said, from what I read. I don't know if that's changed, but that's what I read earlier to this. And certainly a brick and mortar business should be entitled to at least what a home-based business is.
Hello, my name is Andy Baker. I live at 1114 Sharp Avenue. I'm very visual, so I brought some signs to share with you. This is a 2-foot square sign. One thing that's interesting about this bill as well is not only does it allow only 4 square feet, but it requires that it be no larger than 2 feet in width. So I would argue that there are plenty of law firms that have 5 or 6 partners, or companies like Bank of America that have a logo and then spell their name out in one line, would have to have such a small font by limiting the width of the sign to 2 feet that just doesn't make sense. I think that Councilman Jameson's bill didn't require limitations on the width, and I don't think there should be a limitation on the width for this as well. Another interesting fact is that the required sign for public council, city council meetings and the planning commission require a sign that is sizably larger than what they're proposing for a business. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So the Music City Marathon was a few days ago. You can see the large sign for that event. So once again, I mean, we've got an aging population. People need to read the information on signs. This is not just a directional sign. This is the only signage that many businesses are entitled to in the rear of their property. So I think it's vital that we have some decent square footage. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that 4 square feet is too small. I would urge you to look at the signage around your neighborhoods and businesses, and maybe your own businesses, and think about what you would want in the rear of your property. I don't think 4 square feet cuts it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Gatto.
I have a question for Mr. Cooper before I make a motion. Mr. Cooper, I am correct that this bill can be amended on 3rd reading?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then my motion is to move approval on 2nd reading, defer the bill indefinitely, and re-refer it to the Planning Commission to work on this. I think we may need to take another look at this.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-900 amends the Metro Code by adding definitions for accessory apartment and accessory dwelling detached as a use permitted with conditions within historic overlay districts and within RRM, OR20, OR40, and ORI zoning districts. Councilmember Lalonde.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Lalonde.
Thank you. I'd like to move approval of the bill. Thank you.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. No. BL 2011-901 amends the Metro Zoning Code to create a new land use called single-family cottage development in all two-family residential zoning districts and to make a technical change to Chapter 17.40 pertaining to variances. Councilmember Cole.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Cole.
I would move approval with no explanation. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Garrett.
Speak and get this late hour, but I've talked to the council member, I talked to Rick. District council members need to be very aware that this is the next to the last meeting, and these amendments to your zoning text need to be looked at, and this one really needs to be looked at more than you think. I haven't seen the language on this since 1981. And in 1981, that was when the zero lot line duplex law was passed. The reason that law was passed is the reason that you have RS in your districts now, because they built 300 and 400 of those things in areas that the council at that time didn't know existed. This would allow whatever this does in every single solitary district in your council districts that's zoned R. If you've got an infill that's zoned R and it's 10 or 15 acres or 5 acres, whatever this is going to allow, it's going to allow it on. If you've got 100 acres, as they are in certain areas that I used to represent, and in the rural areas, it's going to allow it every 10,000 square feet, every 20,000 square feet, or whatever it is. You just really need to pay attention and look at this, especially I've talked to the sponsor about it, I've talked to Rick about it. It may not be as much land as it was available back in '81, but there is land out there that's zoned R something, and it's going to allow it on every bit of that.
Councilman Cole.
Thank you, Councilman, and we'll take those comments into consideration. I appreciate you raising them. We've got another couple of amendments that we have to go on in third reading, and we'll continue to work on them. Let me assure you the intent is not to backdoor or bring back any sort of zero lot line type of resolution. Indeed, these really talk about 4 units up to 12 units, and it's a cottage type of development that I think we have a demand for in the council and in the city, and but believe me, we'll take those into regard as we go forward. Thank you.
Councilman Holloman.
I just want to say I have read the bill, and it's a very good bill. It does allow a little bit more density in some of these areas, but the trade-off of it is that it provides a much better design, a much better street approach, so that what you get is a development that's much more consistent with the existing neighborhood than your typical duplex zoning that usually is put in as an infill project.
Councilman Mitchell. Councilman Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bear in mind, they asked me about sponsoring this, and I'm all for this. But Councilman, there are areas in this city that there are 100 acres that are zoned R something. That's not an infill. Just be aware of that, those of you that represent those particular areas. Just be aware.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're now at the resolutions on the consent agenda. Councilmember Birch. RS 2011-16, 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31.
Rules approved all of these. There were some different number of votes. Do I need to go through all of them?
Yes.
1621 approved 8-0, 1622 8-0, 1623 9-0, 1624 9-0, and all the rest are 9-0.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is RS 2011-1632, approves the election of notaries public for Davidson County. Councilmember Birch.
Rules and Confirmation voted to approve 9-4-0 against.
Councilman Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of personal privilege, I would just
like to... Could we get through this vote first?
Well, some of them are fixing to leave to go to the ball game. I'll just tell you right away.
Okay,
I just wanted to thank Councilman Stein and Councilman Tiger.
No. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now at bills on introduction and first reading. Is there a motion for their, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jameson, you have a late filed resolution.
I do have a late filed resolution. It'll only take me about 45 minutes to explain this.
Only if folks yield their time to you will it take that long.
I request the suspension of Rule 11 for a late filed resolution with respect to the lease, pending lease between Metro Government and the Center for Charter School Excellence for a creation of a charter school incubation center at the former East Head Start Center in East Nashville.
Is there any objection? It approves the lease between Metro Government and the Center for Charter School Excellence in Tennessee for the use of improved property at 217 South 10th Street. Councilman Jameson.
Thank you. Just move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Is there a motion for all other bills on introduction? Aye. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Is there a motion to adjourn? Aye.